Okay. Thank you for coming, everyone. Welcome to the Planning Commission meeting, July 10th, 2024. We were waiting for you, David. So while David's getting settled, I'll go through the rules real quick, but if and when you come to the microphone, these things are portable. So feel free to move it. Speak loudly. It's being recorded for posterity. And state your name and your home address. Your name and your home address, okay? If you come up twice, just your name. And we're also catering to the internet, this is being recorded. If you had any idea how many people follow us on the internet, you would be amazed. Okay. Allow me to describe the process for those of you who have not been here before. The chair will call an item for consideration. Planning staff will describe the applicant's request and will provide their analysis and findings based on the applicant's application. Following that, the applicant will have an opportunity to state their case and provide any additional information that they wish to provide to this commission. Planning commissioners may ask questions of staff for the applicant at this time. After the commission is finished with their questions, the hearing will be open for public comment from those in attendance. You'll be able to state your thoughts regarding the item under consideration at this time. After all public comment has been heard, the chair will close the public comment portion of the hearing, and the commissioners will deliberate and act on the item under consideration by voting to support or deny the item, or may vote to table the item. As the commission deliberates, they will be guided by the zoning and subdivision codes. We are not a legislative body. We should be our decision based only on interpretation of whether the request meets the criteria in the codes. Before we start, does anybody have any conflict of interest or ex parte communications to disclose? Okay. This brings us to the public comments portion of the meeting. This is for public comments intended for items not already scheduled on the agenda to be discussed. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes per person. When you are called upon, you will be asked to state your full name and address for the record. Please comment. Public comment is not an interactive question and answer forum, but rather than a time for you to state your comments on a particular item or issue. At the 3-minute mark, you will be asked to wrap up your final sentence. Is there anybody that would like to talk about anything under the sun other than the 2 items on the agenda? If somebody did, you would be the first. Yes. Yep. So the way this works in this U-shaped, the people on my left, your right, and Chelsea over here are the planning department. So they're city employees. We up here are the highly paid volunteers called the Planning Commission. So if we can just go around and introduce yourselves, that will suffice for attendance.
I'm Gloria Latimer.
Carrie Storm.
Mike Casey.
David Armstrong.
Roy Rosenthal.
Steve Graybill.
You guys too, please.
Chelsea Royston.
Aaron Ringsred.
And Fred Rolandhagen.
And for you guys, Fred is the planning director. And then we have moral support up on the screen, which is the representative from the city's attorney.
Hi there. Yes, Elizabeth Laboon, Planning Commission attorney for the record. Thank you.
Okay, the first order of business, approval of the meeting minutes from June 12th.
Motion to approve minutes from June 12th, 2024.
Second.
All in favor? Stephen, were you here? Oh, okay. All right. Okay, so we've got
I
3
see
in favor. 4, 2 abstentions. Abstentions.
Yes.
This is a team effort. Okay. Unfinished business. MNR 2402, 328 Manitou Avenue, minor development plan for Green Willow Motel Cottages.
Thank you. Erin Ringsred for the record, planner and landscape architect two for the city of Manitou Springs. Presenting the minor development plan application 2402 for 328 Manitou Ave, also known as Green Willow. For a little bit of background, we have shown to the application process for this application. All the demolition, minor development plan, and the waiver of replat are reviewed by staff. And then once that is deemed complete, they then are heard by the reviewing bodies. This application has been heard by the Historic Preservation Commission, and they have made their recommendation to City Council on their application, which is demolition, where they have their purview. And then the Planning Commission will be reviewing the minor development plan application this evening. The waiver of replat is a staff level review. So we have taken a look at that. They have qualified for that waiver of replat due to the different criteria in a waiver of replat. We can go over that in greater detail if you guys have questions about it. Background, they are requesting approval of a minor development plan to facilitate the construction of 4 residential duplexes, resulting in 8 dwelling units and their associated site improvements at 328 Manitou Avenue. The applicant is requesting alternative compliance under code section 18.03.6.4.c of the Land Use Development Code, specifically for the landscape buffer requirements. And we'll go over that in greater detail throughout my presentation. I'm starting my presentation with some imagery of the site, showing areas that are going to be preserved as part of this application. So the area outlined in green, and so that frontage along Manitou Ave, they are limiting disturbance to only what is absolutely required in order to preserve all of those larger canopy trees that are along that frontage and the vegetation, as well as the site amenities there for residents and what have historically been visitors to this property.
Erin, is this property going to be a commercial property? Is it going to be a residential property? It wasn't clear to me what it was ending up.
So it is currently zoned commercial. The use though is residential. It'll be long-term occupancy units, not intended for short-term and no longer motel use. Rentals, yes. There are 2 structures on the site. This is the first one that are going to be preserved as part of the improvements that are currently being used for long-term rentals, which is anything over 30 days. And then this other property here, also highlighted in green, the structure will also remain on the property for long-term occupancy, long-term rentals. We're going to flip through this rather quickly, but just kind of to provide more photos and context for the site. These structures identified in yellow on the plan are to be demolished as part of this proposal. But the demolition approval and review criteria is under the Historic Preservation Commission's purview per Chapter 17. On the screen is a site plan showing some constraints for this site. The area in red on the bottom of the screen is the area of the floodway. The entirety of this property, though, for the most part, is in the floodplain, which does encumber the site in terms of the type of development allowed. The green willow where the property gets its name is identified in green, and it is a stated goal of the applicant to preserve that tree, heritage tree for the community and that property. The city does have easements on the property, a sewer easement that's 22 feet wide on the north side, as well as an easement for the Creek Walk Trail on the north side of this property as well. The property is zoned commercial, identified here. It is abutted on the north, east, and south side with also commercial properties. On the west, it is a high-density residential zone designation. The application has been reviewed for conformance with the lot frontage, the setback requirements, and lot coverage, residential density, and building height by staff, and has been found to be compliant with the commercial zone district designation, which it is located within. The minimum lot frontage requirement in a commercial zone district is 50 feet, and the lot frontage is a little over 250 feet. The setback requirement in a commercial zone district is 10 feet, and these proposed structures have been set back 120 feet in order to maintain that character along the creek and respect the ecological character and native constraints there. Lot coverage, the maximum lot coverage in the commercial zone district is 75%. What they have proposed is significantly less than that. And it's calculated at 14,109 square feet out of the total 65,775, so approximately 21%. The residential density allowed in a commercial zone district would allow the units for this property to be 30 units. The proposed development once these are built would have 10 units. So well within that maximum density. The building height for maximum is 35 feet in this commercial zone district with a 5-foot additional allowance for accessory projections. Based on the plans as shown, all elevations would be within 35 feet maximum with only accessory projections outside of that envelope.
Aaron, I had a question on that. Can you just confirm, when I was reading this, it says the exterior stair enclosure for the access to the rooftop deck. What is the height of the rooftop deck? I just want to make sure that the rooftop deck isn't the 40-foot. That they're not, getting up there with the rooftop deck. And
I do have sector elevations later in the presentation, so I can show you that there. The applicant did call out a line that shows where their building envelope ends, and they do have their railing that encompasses that rooftop deck does extend outside of that 35 feet, but that is included. A railing is one of those accessory projections that is allowed under the code over 35 feet.
okay, I know there's
So-
just sensitivity around the
Mhm.
height. Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
This is a site plan showing the location of the 4 proposed duplexes. And here are the elevations showing the building heights and the building elevations. With this being building 1, so to kind of reference back, this is building 1 up in the northeast corner of the site with access along the west side of that facade. And then the building 2, which is starting from the east and moving west here, their facades here.
So Aaron, can you
Mhm.
show me where the 40-foot is? Yeah, if you zoom in, that'd be great.
Yeah, let's see. So this dashed line here is the edge of what is their enclosed space. This wall, everything above that dashed line is the parapet wall, and those the stairwell that's getting them to the rooftop, which gives us a total height of 38 feet, 1 inch approximately.
Thank you.
1 second. And this is the building 3 elevations and the building 4 elevations. The materials shown on the facades seek to mimic what is of the structures that are to remain on the property, as well as what was historically there, with materials of white siding, gutters and windows mimicking that. Here's some windows proposed, doors and shingles. In terms of codes sections, there's two, the commercial site standards. We are referencing the residential site standards because that's responding to the use of the site. Although it is going to be rented out on a long-term basis, that is still considered a residential use for the property. And so a couple of the relevant codes there is that multi-household and commercial structures shall not exceed a height of 28 feet with 20 feet of the side and rear property lines adjacent to an existing single household unit. What we have surrounding it is a commercial zone district. We do have multifamily in the sense of, these townhouses in that density. And their adjacent uses do comply with that. There shall be no more than one principal dwelling unit on one lot in the low density residential, general residential, and hillside low density residential zone districts. This property is in the commercial zone district, so that code does not apply. Here's a view of that site context. Development relative to Fountain Creek. Staff reviewed that and found the property or the proposed development to be in compliance. They are using compacted gravel driveways consistent with what is existing conditions, and the proposed concrete is at the parking pads for each duplex, and the grading does not show this impermeable surface draining towards the creek. The grading plan and the associated improvements have been reviewed and found in compliance by the city engineering team. The rear yard setback shall be landscaped in native plant material to blend with the natural ecosystem of the creek. The proposed development plan does show a native seed mix for that rear setback adjacent to the creek walk trail. And then the area adjacent to the creek is being maintained in its existing character and condition. Trash and refuse containers shall be at least 50% screened from the view of the creek walk trail by way of fencing, enclosures, or landscaping to minimize visual impacts and to minimize the opportunity for loose refuse to pollute the creek. The applicant is showing a trash enclosure that would not be visible from the creek walk trail, and that adjacent native vegetation is being shown as well. For site amenities, all commercial. Go to the next slide. There are some code requirements I'm going to review on a high level here. We have site amenities where all commercial and mixed use buildings in the commercial and mixed use commercial zone district shall be included in a minimum of 4% of the site in outdoor amenity space, which can include but is not limited to outdoor dining, outdoor seating such as benches or seat walls, public art display, or similar amenities. By preserving that character of the landscape on the south side, frontage along Manitou Avenue, they are meeting that requirement. Exterior lighting. The intent of this standard is to increase safety, reduce crime, and minimize the negative impacts of adverse off-site impacts, including light trespass and glare on surrounding uses, and to improve views of the night sky, reduce impact to wildlife habitat, and generally conserve energy. The applicant has provided light fixtures communicating the aesthetic of the design intent and have stated their intent to select a final fixture that is dark sky compliant. That would be confirmed as part of staff review during the building permit phase. Photometrics are not required as part of residential development when residential fixtures are used, as they do not have the high degree of trespass that is associated with commercial grade fixtures proposed, like what you might find in a parking lot, for example. Fencing and retaining walls, section 18.03.5. The applicant does not have any proposed retaining walls at this time, and the fencing and its location has been found in compliance with the zoning code. Landscape screening. Landscape screening, there's two code sections here that we've referenced in your staff report, 18.03.6.3D. That plant material shall consist of native and regionally adapted species per the City of Manitou Springs official plant list, with selection based on suitability to conditions of the site, such as existing plant palette, soil conditions, wildlife habitat, microclimate, water requirements, and the surrounding requirement. No proposed plants are on the noxious weed standard list, and all proposed species have been reviewed and approved by the city arborist. All landscape areas in section G shall consist of 100% ground coverage in living vegetation, trees, ground covers, perennials, wildflower mix, shrubs, ornamental grasses, bulbs, and grass mix or turf grass, organic mulch or rock mulch per the following specifications. This is highlighted here on the screen in yellow because it cannot be confirmed by staff that that is 100% covered in living or living vegetation or rock mulch. The areas where cabins 14, 15 in the office are to be removed, no final condition has been indicated, and therefore compliance with this code section cannot be confirmed. Staff recommends a condition of this approval be that the final plan does show improvements in that area that comply with the standards and the design intent. Vegetation preservation standards. We have found that they are in compliance with the vegetation and preservation standards by preserving the south area of the site along the creek. They are able to preserve trees to get to a quantity of 65 in terms of their credit. With the 8 trees that they are proposing need to be removed as part of this development, there is sort of a negative charge of 34 trees. 34 trees is based off of the tables up on your screen here, which is based on the tree size. So for a smaller tree being removed, there's fewer trees, and a bigger tree, there's more trees. Our code does offer the option of 2 trees at 2 trees at 2-inch caliper, for example, on the first one, versus 1 tree at 3.5 caliper inches for that replacement. Based on our calculations, we did calculate the number of trees to be replaced based on the 2-inch caliper quantity, because when there's because of how we're calculating it, we went with the more stringent one per our code, where if there's in doubt, we have to go with the more stringent requirement. 3 measures shall be taken to conserve all on-site plants, vegetation proposed to be preserved with any new or infill development. They are preserving not only trees, but also shrubs and bushes along their site. I do want to issue a correction here in the table I had included in my staff report. They are meeting the requirement with the tree credit. So they have a 65 credit and with the trees required under the other landscape sections here, it is a wash, they break even, where the shrub is the area where there is additional shrubs that would need to be seen on the final landscape plan, which is a recommended condition by staff. So streetscape landscape standards, this does require a minimum of 1 deciduous street tree per 40 linear feet of street tree frontage. As indicated in this table, that does then require 6 trees, but that is satisfied with the preservation requirement credits. From a commercial mixed use and multi-household development landscape standards, section 18.03.6.7, it does require that no more than 30% of the total landscaped area have a high water use. And the applicant has indicated in their plans and in their development narrative that they will not have more than 30% in high water usage. We have found them to be in compliance with the perimeter landscaping. However, with regards to the buffer required in 18.03.6.7.3, landscape is required around the perimeter of the site for a landscape buffer type A per section 18.3.6 6.10. And that is why alternative compliance is being requested. And I'll be getting into that again a little bit. I have a few slides strictly devoted to that. This area here, in terms of buffer type A, in the area outlined in red here is the areas where we need confirmation on that final landscape plan, which is what we're recommending in a condition of what's going to go back in those places. The area inside that red area is where buildings are to be demolished. And so we will need to go see what's going back in there from a landscape or finished surface as part of that. So alternative compliance is identified in section 18.03.6.4. It states that the final decision-making body may approve an alternative compliance request. In this case, that's the Planning Commission, where deviation from the landscaping standards is justified because of site or development conditions that make strict compliance with such standards impossible or impractical. The alternative compliance request shall indicate how the proposed deviations are justified by the site or development conditions and illustrate how they would be mitigated by including one of the options from natural resource protection section of table 18.03.7.5-1. Deviations can be justified due to the following: preserving natural conditions such as water courses, natural rock formations, or topography, the presence of easements that prevent landscaping, or other situations where strict compliance with the standards is deemed impractical as determined by the decision-making body. This diagram I showed earlier is why staff felt comfortable bringing this to the Planning Commission for your consideration for alternative compliance with the floodway and the floodplain constraints, the sewer easement for the city, and the applicant's desire, which is supported by our code, to preserve as much existing trees as possible on the site. It does start to really restrict what areas of this property are available for development. And so that I'm just reiterating some of those constraints that we're seeing here, and which we'd like to have considered as part of this alternative compliance request. In terms of the natural resource protection section of code, there are two code requirements that they are meeting with their application. One is keeping, at least 25% of the space as pervious area, such as landscape planters or rooftop gardens. This property has a lot of, as we talked about in terms of lot coverage, they are maintaining a lot of pervious surface on the site and leaving a lot of the site for resident enjoyment of the outdoor spaces. Due to the floodplain restrictions, they have put parking under living space because living space cannot exist at ground level in a floodplain. And so that is also one of our natural resource protection requirements in an effort to reduce impervious surface is there is a credit for having parking underneath finished living space, which this applicant is doing on all 4 of the proposed structures. I'm not going to go through each of these individually in the same level of detail as I've gone through the others, but if there's questions specifically about some of these code sections, I'm happy to answer questions. The applicant has been found in their development application to meet the requirements outlined for sustainable site improvements, parking requirements, bicycle parking requirements, parking area design standards, limits of disturbance, ecological characterization study. That study has been provided to you guys for your review. The development in the flood hazard area and the wildlife mitigation standards are identified here in gray. The flood hazard area and development within that is reviewed by our floodplain administrator and would be reviewed as part of our building permit review. So anything that's related to life safety and additional sort of construction means and methods would be reviewed by them. We have confirmed that they're not showing living space in the floodplain. And then wildfire mitigation standards, that is also an item where our fire department will review that as part of their building permit review. A geologic hazard evaluation tier 1 report has been provided as part of the application package. A drainage plan has been required. In the table of allowable uses, long-term occupancy, long-term rentals is permitted in the commercial zone district, and it is been compliant with the residential uses code section. For the approval criteria here on the screen, we have 6 criteria for Planning Commission's consideration. General conformance with goals and policies of the comprehensive plans and any other policies adopted by City Council. That the details of the use, site design, building location, orientation, and exterior building materials are compatible and harmonious with the surrounding neighborhood. That the project meets dimensional standards applicable to the zone district, such as but not limited to building setbacks, building height, and building area, or any applicable requirement. That the project grading, drainage, flood protection, stormwater quality, and stormwater mitigation complies with the applicable sections of the LUDC, and that the project complies with all the development standards of this section, and that the project preserves, protects, integrates, or mitigates impacts to any identified sensitive or hazardous natural features associated with the site. Apologize, a typo there, which is partially why this applicant is preserving that area along the creek. Staff recommendations. Staff recommends that the final landscape plan will have an irrigation plan that would be submitted to staff and reviewed and approved prior to the issuance of a building permit. That the final landscape plan shall show proposed landscape improvements for the building footprints for the areas to be removed for cabin 15 and the office. And that the final landscape plan will correct the deficit in shrub and ornamental grass planting requirements as identified by the code requirements and quantified in the staff report. This concludes staff's presentation. I have the motion language up on the screen, which I can bring back up after the applicant presents. But thanks for any questions.
Any questions for staff?
I had a question. You said the ecological characterization study has been supplied, but I didn't see it in the packet. Am I not finding it correctly?
Let me double check, but I believe that was uploaded.
Is that the geohazard report?
No, that's a separate report. Was it uploaded as a separate document? Oh, anyway, if somebody could send me a copy, I'd appreciate it.
We'll double check that, but I do want to take credit for that mistake if there is one. Aaron was on vacation and left it in my hands and I let you down. So
Okay.
I apologize. But we'll get that to you ASAP.
Yeah, I'd just like to review it later.
Any other questions? Highly encouraged. I have a couple. You mentioned the correction in verbally just now with the trees. Does that affect your staff recommendations at all?
No, it does not. They are found with the 65 credit trees. The 65 tree requirement is satisfied.
Okay. And then in the motion language you mentioned, you also address WOR 2401. Is it safe to assume that if the minor development is approved, then WOR 2401 is automatically approved as well?
Yeah, the waiver of replat is approved by staff, and that was just an oversight on my part, not taking that out of the application. We had some back and forth going into this meeting.
Okay.
So.
All right. Thank you. Okay, would the applicant like to step up to the podium, say a few words? And I didn't mention that you have to press the little green button to be live. Good.
My name is Greg Harith. My sister Evelyn Wagner and our mother Beverly Harith are representing 328 Manitou Avenue, the Green Willow Motel and Cottages. I actually reside in Virginia. Evelyn resides in Colorado Springs and Beverly resides here. And we have a team, planning team, NES, and I'll let them do their introductions.
I'm Chris Lieber with NES, a principal at NES. Our offices are located at 619 North Cascade Avenue in Colorado Springs, and I live at 1013 Sun Drive in Colorado Springs. I'm also joined by Kim Johnson.
And I'm Kim Johnson with NES, and my address is 515 Gilcrest Road, Colorado Springs.
Thank you. So I'll start as the family that is owns and is representing the property in the project here. First of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to come tonight to present the project that we'd like to put forward. A little bit of history. Our family moved to Manitou Springs back in 1952. Our grandparents purchased the Green Willow and started to run the business. Our family moved there in 1970 to help my grandmother run the business, and eventually our parents took over management and running of the property and continued until they finally retired out at age 78. Evelyn and I took the business over from them. The situation did change with Evelyn and I's management of the property. Unfortunately, we did not have the circumstances to allow us to live on the property as our parents and grandparents had done. We had to replace all of the efforts that they did with staff. The combination of the costs of having staff do what family can do became pretty high. So it was 2018 when we took over. That combined with the buildings are close to 110 plus years old. The degradation continues to increase. The supports have allowed the buildings to settle onto the utilities. So the combination of the degradation of the actual wood material, the foundations below, the close proximity of the pine trees and the root systems have rotted out a good portion of it. We have provided a structural engineering report that does explain that, and the combination of trying to go back and refurbish was well in excess of what we could afford. Evelyn and I tried as hard as we could, inheriting a family business that's been going for quite a while. We wanted to try to succeed. Unfortunately, we saw 5 years of loss to a total of $239,000. In the 8 years that we've managed the property, we ended up 2 years ago deciding we just could not keep pouring money into a losing business with high risk. So we shut the business down, and we have just been renting the 2 houses on the property. In that 8 years, Evelyn and I have not taken a draw from the LLC that we put together to try to manage that property. We decided it was time to transition out of the high-risk summer-only motel business that was trying to fix those buildings, trying to pay staff, and competing with the large number of mega motels that have moved into the area and the huge increase of the Airbnb competition. So we want to transition out of a unfortunately unprofitable losing business into something that's a little more profitable and move from the high risk summer only business to a lower risk annual rentals. So our objective is to tear down the old buildings and replace those with the 4 duplexes on the property. One of the things that we felt very important was not to saturate the property with as many buildings as we possibly could to try to get as much money out of that as we could. We wanted to maintain the beautiful setting that we grew up with and that our customers have enjoyed for the 70 years. So we are trying to keep the duplexes within the footprint of the majority of the cottages that we plan to take down, and then keep the whole front of the property available for the tenants. And basically it will be like a private park. You have Fountain Creek running across the front of it. We have a old stone fireplace, picnic tables, swing set. So that's the intent, is to keep that area up and available. That's what we wanted to present just from the owner's perspective. We brought NES to help us. We realized we needed some professionals to help us go through all of this and do things correctly. They've done an exceptional job in helping us, and Chris is going to present our proposal with the details for you all.
Great. Thank you, Greg. And good evening, everyone. And thank you for this opportunity to share a bit of information about this project. I think Aaron did a great job of covering much of this in detail. So I would like to kind of move through at a high level and but also address, I think, some of the key points along the way. So if I could have the next slide, please. Great, thank you. So our request obviously here tonight is for your consideration of a minor development plan as well as a landscape alternative compliance. Next slide. You're all very familiar with this particular project site. Just as a note, this is all one lot. That in terms of context, obviously located along Manitou Avenue, and we have the Creek Walk Trail on the north side. And it's really that character and context that the Harith family really wants to be able to maintain and conserve. So next, please. In terms of zoning, indeed, this is zoned commercial and therefore is subject to the zoning requirements for that district. It also is part of the Villas sub-district. If you're familiar with some of the surrounding zoning, primarily commercial as it wraps around the parcel. As well as, and some of that being high density residential to the west, and kind of a mix of commercial and residential to the south. Next, please. In terms of access to the site, all the access is really via Manitou Avenue across the existing bridge across the creek. And then pedestrian access via the Creek Walk on the north side. The property actually sits quite a bit lower than Manitou Avenue, but the site overall gently slopes really from north to south back down to the creek. And one of the important pieces of that, the views then from Manitou of that front area, we feel are pretty important, and hence part of the desire to really conserve that front that important frontage. I think Aaron did a nice job of talking a little bit about the surrounding land uses, but again, it's a mix of commercial, residential. There's of course a little bit of campground to the east as well as we work our way around the site. Next, please. I think it is worth noting the kind of, I will say, eclectic architecture that does surround the site. There's a mix of architecture, a mix of buildings. You'll recognize a number of these. In the upper left-hand corner, we have the Fountain Creek Villas, the Peacock Farms condo up in the kind of the right-hand corner, and then the Taos condos. Located there across the bottom. So you can see a variety of different architectural styles. And so when we are talking about this particular project, we felt it was important that the architecture match and really recall some of the the existing Green Willow architecture, and hence the desire for the white siding and the green and black roofs. Again, that matches existing buildings that are there and the two buildings that are proposed to remain. Next, please. A lot of commercial context as well, and you'll see a pretty eclectic mix of building heights, roof lines, building materials. And again, this is all within the context of this particular project site. Next, please. Property encumbrances. This project and this property has, as Aaron pointed out, a number of challenges. And just shy of 50% of the site is encumbered in some way, in some form, whether it be the floodway and Fountain Creek along the frontage on the south edge of the site, whether it be the existing public utility easements that cross kind of through the center of the site, setbacks or easements for the Creek Walk Trail. All of those really begin to limit where development can happen. At the same time, I think, again, there was a real desire to say, all right, how could buildings be placed as far back from Manitou Avenue as possible to preserve that front corridor, even with all of the restrictions, encumbrances that exist on the property itself. Next, please. There are the buildings that you see reflected here with the X through them. Those are the buildings that are proposed to be removed, demolished as part of this project. There are 2 residences that would remain, and those you'll see in the red crosshatch. One is located pretty much in the center of the site, and the other along that eastern edge. Next, please. So what is proposed as much as possible to retain a similar look and feel for the property, really retain what many have said to be a park-like setting along the frontage, down along the creek. Again, construct 3 duplexes where the previous seasonal motel units were located. And then there's one additional, that 4th duplex tucked into the northeast corner of the site. There are the 2 existing single-family residences, again, that would remain. One of the things that's also really important to the family, and in fact, we heard this at HPC, this desire to retain the motor court circulation pattern, because it's part of that character, right? As you can see from Manitou Avenue. So that is retained in this concept. Maintaining the gravel access and gravel parking. Again, that's part of its kind of history and appeal. Can't say enough about the green willow tree. If you've seen this massive tree out there, one of the very important things to the family, to this project, is to preserve that and give it plenty of space and plenty of leeway for this effort. There are I think some other important pieces to this, that this project actually, what's proposed actually improves emergency access by providing adequate turnaround space where that doesn't exist today. Again, and trying to really maximize that experience, that park-like experience in the front with views to Pikes Peak, as well as Fountain Creek, maintaining access to the Creek Walk Trail, and again, keeping that look and kind of quality character of the site. Next, please. This is just, I think, another way of looking at it. The red dashed lines represent buildings to be removed. The blue lines represent the 2 residences to remain. And then I'm going to call it the yellow or orange, represent the 4 proposed duplex units. So you can begin to see how all of these various pieces fit together. Okay, next. We spent a lot of time looking at existing trees and addressing code requirements and really understanding, if you will, the size of these trees. And we're very fortunate to have many large mature trees on this site. And so one of the main focuses of the project too is to be able to retain those. We're not able to retain all of them. Some of them are literally at the edge of the foundations of the current seasonal hotel units, motel units. And quite honestly, any demolition is going to disturb those. In fact, those trees are also contributing to some of the issues, the structural issues of the existing motel units. So the trees that you see in red, there's an oval in the middle, and then 2 of those other trees, and then another one down on that eastern edge. And all of those are really affected by not just the proposed new development, but really even the demolition of the existing units. But the rest of the trees are being preserved. A lot of foliage, of course, out along Manitou Avenue, along Fountain Creek, and then an important row of trees there on the far west side as well. So next, please. One of the requests that we have made is for alternative landscape compliance, and I think Aaron did a nice job of kind of laying that out in a fair amount of detail. There are a number of existing, obviously, conditions here or unique, what I would call site, whether you call them site challenges or site opportunities. And if we're going to maintain this kind of pastoral park-like setting, we thought it made a lot of sense to, again, preserve those trees and really utilize the credits from those trees to look towards landscape compliance. I know there were a couple of items that staff did raise. One was at the time of final landscape to, first of all, a condition to provide a final landscape plan and irrigation plan at time of building permit. We fully expect that and are happy to be able to provide that as part of this project. Another one was just simply clarification of ground materials, ground plane materials in locations where a couple of the buildings have been removed. And we're fully committed to being able to address that at the time of the final landscape plan as well. We know when those buildings get removed, something has to go back into that space and on that ground plane. And so that's something I know we're prepared to do. I think the one thing we would ask, though, is that when we look at the abundance of trees, the abundance of vegetation on the site and those credits, that we think that the trees, quite honestly, do a much better job of screening and providing that setting than adding the additional shrubs. So we're looking for, I think, that, if you will, that credit and support for that. Now, I think that was the third or fourth item that staff had identified. So we ask for your consideration with that here this evening. But next, please. So the buildings themselves, one of the very important items that drives so much of this design is the fact that the site is all in the floodplain. And what that means is that first level, the ground floor level, cannot be occupied kind of residential space. Hence, it is parking space underneath, but that ends up driving the building height in order to then get adequate amount of living space above those usable garages. The other thing, though, that we put a fair amount of time into is thoughts around a building orientation. And the building placement allows the garages to actually be accessed on the backside, so not on the Manitou Avenue side. So we think that's a real plus. You're not going to be seeing those garage doors from Manitou Avenue. And that's, again, we think an important design element and design choice, and yet still being able to maintain that motor court sort of feel and character out in front. Aaron talked a little bit about our compliance with building height. There is a desire for rooftop access, so you can enjoy views to Pikes Peak, but we're able to do that and accomplish that within the provisions of the code and building height limitations. We talked a little bit also about the building heights or building materials, excuse me, and the desire, again, to have that blend in with the existing residential units and with the kind of the context and character overall with the white siding, black and roofs and gutters, this idea of covered porches. And then also just being respectful of some of the buildings currently have a flat roof. So just being, thoughtful and with the context. Thank you. Next slide. We've just got a number of photos I want to move through really quickly here. The view here really doesn't change. This is that access point across the bridge. Next, please. Some of the trees, that front park-like setting, again, we would want to maintain that. If you look kind of through the trees at the very back of this, that's where the existing motel units are. And that's right where the proposed duplexes would be as well. So we get the benefit of all of that tree frontage and tree canopy. Next. Some of the great views, the great spaces down by the creek. Next. Again, that park-like setting that so many people have enjoyed. Next. I want to walk you through just a couple of those buildings. Again, this is where you see these particular units. These are on the east side. These would be removed. Next, please. Both of these buildings, they are existing single-family residences. They would remain. Next. These are some of the one is that kind of the outbuilding, and then one of the old motel units. And here's a great example of a tree pushing up the deck that's out front, and why just simple even removal of that building would impact the tree. Next, please. Here's some other examples of some of the units that would be removed, and again, some of the proximities of the trees. Next. Just another example here. And you can see actually here on the left is part of the green willow, and why careful removal of this building, and why no future duplex units are proposed in close proximity to this tree. Next. Just real quickly, I think Greg alluded to part of this process, of course, has been to work through the HPC and regarding approval of demolition, and a big part of that justification, and we're grateful for their recommendation of approval to City Council, has to do with the condition of the buildings themselves, and that they are truly at their end of their lifespan, and significant issues. Next. Another important piece of that is being able to talk about the fact that there is economic hardship, and that's one of the criteria that certainly are important when considering a demolition permit approval. So next, please. All right. I'm not going to go through all of these. Aaron, again, I think did a great job talking about the development plan criteria and how we do meet all of those criteria. Next, please. We thought we'd just touch base real quickly. We took a good look at Plan Manitou and tried to understand how this project really fits into the bigger picture and the bigger vision. I think our efforts to really try and balance preservation of resources, and I would say both trying to be respectful of the history of the green willow, but also from a natural resource standpoint, and preserving that frontage, consistent with some of the goals in Plan Manitou when it comes to land use. And this idea of wanting to be able to provide for a variety of housing options. And I think one of the things this project does a nice job of is really kind of hitting the what I would call the missing middle. When you think about the types of housing that currently are available, and some of the gaps and some of the needs. So next, please. Again, several of these, again, dealing with future land use, thinking about how this fits into the other kind of commercial setting overall in the surrounding context. This idea of reinvesting and looking for redevelopment opportunities in the city's gateway. Again, all of those we think fit well with Plan Manitou. Next. And finally, regarding resiliency and reinvestment, and really, again, adaptive reuse. Next, please. With that, again, we appreciate your consideration, your time this evening, and would be happy to answer any questions that you may have. So thank you.
Chris, I couldn't quite figure out the parking. Do I understand? I got the part about accessing the garages from the north side. But do I understand that between the new duplexes and the creek, there will be no paved gravel or otherwise car spaces?
There will be the motor court, that turnaround space. There's gravel that currently provides, I want to call it a loop out in front. That would largely remain. But in terms of where residences would, residents would park, they're actually accessed. I don't have a pointer here, but you would head north across the bridge, which is in that south. I'm wondering if we may have a better, Aaron, if you could maybe roll back a couple slides to a better map. Yeah, I may have Greg. Greg will be our pointer here. Thank you, Greg. There, this would work. Okay, so you can see the bridge in the southeast corner. You'd be able to head, if you're a resident, you'd head straight through the gap, through the gap there, and then you turn left and be able to swing around, and you'd enter into those garages. But there's also then, or into the unit in the far northeast corner, but there's additional parking space in the back. At the same time, though, there is that kind of loop that would sit out front, and you'd be able to access the existing building. Because remember, the house that's kind of in the center of the site, that would remain. And so there would be exterior parking for that building. There's no garage.
I'm just not seeing a loop. I'm seeing buildings planted over the existing loop.
I'll have Greg address that.
So yes, you caught something that I just caught today. We have talked about the loop being there, and we sat down and did a hard look at the whole thing to start picking out where the implementation and the actual living conditions, and realized the loop we are going to lose. The actual ability to drive around the circle we will lose. But I think the end result is even better. What we've provided is parking in the rear of the property. So where before, when the motel was running, we would have anywhere from 10 to 15 to 20 cars parked across that whole property visible from the street. That's more or less going to be removed. Over on the far east side, there will be some places where you might see a car or two, but the majority of them will be up in the back, either in the 2-car garages for each of the units or in some of the additional parking if they have guests. The area you're talking about, which is to the right of the green willow tree and to the left of the middle home, that area will retain itself as gravel driveway. It will not be blacktop or concrete. It'll be a gravel driveway. It can be used, but our thought is to minimize driving into that area, because the primary idea is to have access for the tenants down to the creek area. So we don't want cars going in and out of there.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that clarifies it. You know, it's obviously a phenomenal site with a Fountain Creek and the trees, and particularly the willow, and you know, bringing the cars around to the backside, and then even using gravel instead of paving in the front. Terrific. I know we're not here to design your project, but that's encouraging.
Great. Thank
Yeah,
you.
it was a good question to ask. How many guest spots per unit? I mean, it's something we'd ask normally.
Yeah, it's my understanding there isn't a requirement for guest parking. However, we do have space for that, as Greg mentioned, some of that gravel space, but there's also additional space in the back, which we think is a great fit. Oh, and on-street parking as well. Yes.
Well, I'll just say I really like the project from bringing additional rental properties into this community. One of the things we hear a lot when we're out and about is that, you know, there's the VRBOs have sucked up all the rental properties, and there's not enough opportunities for young families, things for people to rent. So bringing something in and reusing, you know, a property that's gone derelict and making it into something that's going to be a nice, viable community property. I think it's a great project.
One other question. I'm presuming at this stage, NES, your land use planners, the architectural design has not been completed. You will got to get your approvals first, right?
Yeah. So at NES, we are land planners and landscape architects, and I'll have Greg address any questions regarding architecture.
So the drawings that you saw, we did have an architect provide those for us. We're paying for this on a hide, so we've tried to minimize the cost the best we can. As the approvals have come in, we're extremely uncertain getting through the HPC of which path we'd be able to take. So we provided what we needed to.
Gotcha.
We're
Yeah,
with
that's what it looked
approvals,
like.
we'll move to the next step. I think Cynthia did a phenomenal job of drawing out all four sides of all of the units to give a perspective of what those will look like. So yes, with approval, the next step will be to finish out the architectural and be able to hand that. Our general contractor, Lindsay Samuelson, is on the Zoom. We had her on board in case questions came up, but once we get the full architectural drawings, we'll hand those over for estimates from the general contractor.
Thank you.
Could you, can you summarize the vibe of the HPC meeting quickly?
Oh, well.
I don't know that that has
No,
a
no,
bearing
no,
on
just-
the decision.
Strictly curious.
Yeah, so I think for the most part, the most positive aspect of that was, and unfortunately, I do not remember her name, one of the commissioners spoke up.
And Nichols.
Ms. Nichols, spoke up and said the real purpose of the folks there was to judge our submission based on the code. And the staff helped us tremendously, despite my misgivings. They forced me to provide really good information, and it was beneficial. And the response that I took away was we provided an overwhelming package for the economic hardship to convince them that our proposal was in line with the code for an economic hardship request for demolition of historic structures. So I think that they listened and heard and reviewed our package and accepted that wanting to maintain historic buildings is a admirable feat, but it's not always possible. I think Chris has said it multiple times and Aaron did too. The buildings are not the only historic aspect to this property. The park-like setting, the frontage area, the 350-year-old green willow tree. Those are also Manitou's history, and we're trying to retain as much of that as possible.
Good for you.
That
Could I jump in as well? The HPC did forward a recommendation of approval of the demolition to city planning, city council, and that will be heard in August.
If I may just add one more thing, I think we do a lot of work in a lot of communities, to be quite honest. And I think the requirements to get approval of a demolition are very stringent in Manitou. They really are. And they hold us to a very high standard. And I think your staff did a great job of holding us to a high standard. I think HPC did the same. And I think, while that's challenging, it's the way that it should be. And so we're really pleased, I think, with their recommendation and they asked some very, very good, tough questions. And it takes a lot of work to get a complete application together. And again, we appreciate all the help from staff in order to get to that point. So.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you for providing a very clear and understandable presentation. Same with you, Aaron. It helps. Are you okay with staff's recommendations in the report? With the one exception?
We are, yes.
With the one exception.
With
You were hoping for more trees, less bushes.
I'm trying to remember if there were 3 or 4 items. The first item.
Can I read it to you?
Yes, please.
A final landscape plan with an irrigation plan. So these are your conditions. Okay. A final landscape plan with an irrigation plan shall be submitted for staff review and approval prior to the issuance of a building permit. Number 2, the final landscape plan shall include proposed landscape improvements for the building footprints for the removed cabin 14 and 15 and office. Finally, the final landscape plan will correct the deficit in shrub and ornamental grass planting requirements as identified by the code requirements and quantified in this report.
Yes.
So
And
Yes, and I think the number of bushes, we started last year planning ahead. We've started putting trees and bushes in. We're going to continue that. However this plays out, we're going to continue to get trees and bushes across the property. So I think we fully expect to meet the staff's request. Yep. Does that answer your questions?
Hey, I would just ask the staff if plants that you've planted already or plants you're planting now will meet that requirement. I wouldn't want you to plant ahead and, find out those don't meet that requirement.
Yes, so existing shrubs do count, or anything that's planted in terms of, they do count towards that total requirement. And so that is what has been quantified here. In terms of where those numbers are coming from, there's 32 of those shrubs are required as part of the 18.03.6.7 commercial mixed use landscape standards. And then 84 are required for the screening and buffering requirement, which is where we then get that delta. So they're getting credit for 18 of them that are planted and have been preserved per the quantities provided, with 98 of them then still being in a deficit. With the areas proposed to be defined, I think there would probably be inching up on that quantity, but the code does require some areas to be planted with shrubs and perennials and not just a seed mix, so that there is some screening or some fullness in areas of the site where a lot is being changed or going away.
but I don't want to put words in your mouth, but your request was more trees, less bush, right? Is that what I heard?
yes, that was our request.
Okay,
Yes.
well, you guys can fight that battle when it hits at the end, right? I mean, that's because there's compromise in the plan.
I think I would prefer a recommendation from the commission with regards to that 98 shrub quantity. If you're wanting to mitigate that with 50% of that can be trees instead of shrubs, that is, I think acceptable to staff. Fred and Chelsea, do you have other thoughts on that?
I think that the City Planning Commission could empower staff to make a determination at the time of the final landscape plan, if that is the wish of the commission.
I like that approach. And when you're right on a Fountain Creek, trees just make sense, so.
Well, if you like it that much, keep that in mind when you make a motion.
Okay.
Any other questions for
I-
the applicant?
I do. How do we address the alternative compliance aspect? Is that part of your decision now, or will that be part of your approval?
Yes.
Because that's one
we're
aspect that
probably leaning to what Chelsea just said, that at the end. Okay, if on a total side note, not a requirement, but I noticed on your design that the stairs came perpendicular to the building. I just was wondering, just think about making them parallel. It was kind of just a thought. And then finally, I got to ask you, what is the diameter of that tree?
297 inches,
Seriously?
and that's the smaller of the two.
That's the diameter or the circumference?
I'm sorry, that's the circumference.
Okay.
The camber, caliper I have in my notes. I have to pull that out.
You have a caliper that big?
Yes. No, it's circumference divided by pi
Okay, okay. All
provides
right.
the caliper.
Well, if you haven't seen the tree, it's mind blowing. Okay, thank you very much. there anybody in the audience that would like to comment on this application?
Jan Johnson from 113 Beckers. And having lived and seen the Green Willow since the middle 90s and how it's changed and kind of deteriorated, I am just so grateful that you're taking these steps. Brings me to tears.
Thank you. Anybody else? I'll check the throngs of humanity online. I don't see any hands. So the public input is closed.
Sure, 176-inch circumference, 87.9.
Yeah, it's massive. Thank you. It's massive. Okay, the public input is closed. We are at the table. This is where we talk.
About our feelings.
Question for staff. You didn't get any negative comments, or we would have heard about that?
That's correct. We did not receive any written comments prior to this meeting.
And public notice was given in the required circumference.
That's correct. Sorry, I overlooked that in my presentation, but yes, the postcards were sent out. It was noticed in the newspaper, and then a poster was posted on the property as well.
Really nice job on the presentation, Aaron.
Does anybody like to make a motion?
I'll give it a stab. So motion to approve MNR 2402 at 328 Manitou Avenue based on the findings that the request meets the review criteria granting a minor development plan as set forth in the city code section 18.06.4.12 with staff conditions to include allowing staff. And then how was it we changing that? For number 3, what was the wording? Please help me, Chelsea. It was
To allow staff, I think discretion over
Just-
the final landscape plan. In
discretion
accordance with-
allow the landscape mix. The plant mix of the final plan?
So are we eliminating item number 3 and overriding, or are we making
Nope.
it 4th?
I thought we were just allow it. I don't have it. I was just editing 3.
Okay.
Allowing the staff
There's 3, just for the record, there's 3 requirements, not 4.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
That's unanimous.
For the record, it was passed unanimously, and reading between the lines that because the application was presented with that alternative compliance request, that is approved as part of this.
I included.
And just, do we have to make the title of the document at the very top? MNR 2402 and WOR 2401?
I
No.
included it in the motion.
But I mean, just for future reference that we approve to.
MNR 2402 was the only one before planning commission tonight. It was an error on my part that the WOR was
Okay, all right,
in there.
all right. We're good. Good luck. Thank you, guys. Okay, next item on business, MNR 2401, 324 Becker's Lane, minor development plan for Garden of the Gods Trading Post. New business.
Thank you. Chelsea Royston for the record. Here we have MNR 2401, which is a minor development plan. Do you mind closing that? Thanks. At 324 Becker's Lane, otherwise known as the Garden of the Gods Trading Post. The application is for a 5,016 square foot addition, which equates to 25% of the building area to the commercial building. The property is zoned commercial and is not in a historic subdistrict. We do have an interesting kink in this application, though. For context, this site is at the very border of the city of Manitou Springs city limits, and to the north of their site is city of Colorado Springs and the Garden of the Gods Park. So we are looking at this area to the east of Becker's Lane as it currently exists. Like I said, it is zoned commercial. The site is actually, we required two applications, one to be reviewed by the city of Manitou Springs, one to be reviewed by the city of Colorado Springs. The Garden of the Gods Trading Post has a portion of the site that is in Colorado Springs city limits, and the actual building addition itself will be solely within the city of Manitou Springs city limits. During the pre-application meeting, it was decided by both City of Colorado Springs and City of Manitou Springs that the site would be viewed holistically and reviewed more or less as one site, with deference to the more stringent set of regulations, so that the site as a whole meets both cities' requirements, without double requiring landscaping or some such flaw. So what you see in the city of Manitou Springs is just the building. However, much of the landscaping and the realigned parking is within the city of Colorado Springs. So here is our proposed landscaping plan. I will apologize. I did not prepare a presentation as thorough as Aaron's. However, please rest assured that the landscaping does comply with the city of Manitou Springs and the city of Colorado Springs standards. Excuse me. The existing landscape area is 56,400 square feet, which is 53% lot coverage. The proposed increase is approximately 1% to 143 square feet for a total landscaping area of 56,543 square feet. The total coverage for the site for building and concrete, the impervious area currently exists at will exist at 46% lot coverage, where 75% lot coverage is permitted by code for the commercial zone district. Oh, excuse me, I had this a little bit out of order. I did want to make the commission aware that the city of Colorado Springs recently approved a rezoning of the site to mixed use from park. It was owned by the city of Colorado Springs. It was recently engaged in a land exchange. Therefore, this portion of land that exists in Colorado Springs here with the parking lot was rezoned to mixed use commercial to allow for this development. That did get passed by Colorado Springs City Council at the end of June. The development plan was also recently approved by the city of Colorado Springs at the end of June to facilitate this development. So though the site does abut directly to Garden of the Gods Park, this application has been reviewed and approved strenuously by the city of Colorado Springs, which owns and operates the park. We have reviewed, in addition to the minor development plan, the geologic hazards evaluation, which was a tier 1 letter, a landscape and irrigation plan, drainage report, traffic impact letter, and property improvement permit. There are other considerations of the site, such as a potential realignment of Becker's Lane. It was decided by the city of Colorado Springs and the city of Manitou Springs to not require that with this application, but rather with any future development plan. And that is noted on both sets of plans. So at that point, a traffic impact study will be completed. However, it was not required with this application. Planning staff did not identify any major concerns with the proposal. The applicant was asked to confirm compliance with various green energy requirements and modify some general notes on the plans to update landscaping legends, diagrams, things like that. However, all of those minor adjustments were made and have been completed to staff's satisfaction. Here we have a few views of the existing trading post building. And this facing southwest, this is the parking lot that will be realigned closer to Garden Lane to facilitate the development of that 25% square foot or 25% building addition in the back. These are the proposed elevations. The maximum building height, I believe, is 35 feet in the commercial zone district. However, this building is proposed to be at approximately 18 feet in height. Staff did publicly notice the application with a poster on site, mailed postcards to property owners within 300 feet of the subject property, and published notification in the newspaper. A community meeting was held, a neighborhood meeting was held on site at 324 Becker's Lane on February 5th, 2024. That meeting was also publicly noticed, and all members that attended that meeting were notified of this application through email. Staff received 3 public comments regarding the project after the community meeting and during the City of Colorado Springs review. We worked closely with their planning staff to understand their neighbor concerns as well. The comments detailed concerns regarding light and noise pollution, the claim for the need to restore the riparian ecosystem, traffic congestion, commercial use, and development stipulations of the Garden of the Gods land. Staff finds that no new lights are being proposed with this, as the Garden of the Gods trading post operates almost solely within daylight hours that adjust per time of year. And so no new parking lot lights will be proposed. So the dark sky compliance is there. This building will not impact the dry swale that exists to the southeast of the building. Though the building will be expanding, retail operation of the expansion will be limited. That is primarily for storage. And as I stated, the parking lot that is being reconfigured is actually, I think it's only a few parking spaces difference, maybe 1 or 2. They do still provide approximately 123 parking spaces, and I believe 94 are required by the square footage, the new square footage, in conjunction with the existing. So they do still meet parking standards. In the commercial zone district, the setback, the minimum front setback is 10 feet. The proposed addition is 64 feet from the front property line or greater along Garden Lane. The minimum side setback also exceeds the required 5 feet. And the minimum rear setback is also 10 feet. So this building addition is well within the perimeter of the lot. As I stated before, the lot coverage permitted in the commercial zone district is 75%. And this will be approximately 46% lot coverage. The outdoor dining on the area or on the site also brings the site into compliance with the outdoor amenity space that is required, and it accounts for 13% of the site area. No new fencing or retaining walls are being proposed with this application. All of the proposed landscaping complies with the city of Manitou Springs and the city of Colorado Springs official plant lists, and no noxious none of the proposed plants appear on the noxious weed standards. All of the identified landscape areas within the project area are 100% covered with living vegetation or rock mulch. Based on the information provided by the applicant, 9 trees will be removed during construction, and due to the caliper inches of these trees, they will need to replace those trees with 34 trees of 2-inch caliper. This quantity requirement is satisfied by the existing trees being preserved during construction and the addition of new 2-inch caliper trees being planted for a total of 31 new trees. Let's see. We have, I'm going to go back to that landscape plan. You can see that the majority of the, not the majority, excuse me, much of the required tree caliper and those replacement trees will be focused along Garden Lane there to preserve the natural aesthetic there. There will be more landscaping along the edge of the realigned parking lot. And additional trees will be planted along the western edge of the parking lot to account for those trees that are required through code. Planning staff reviews solar infrastructure at the building permit phase. However, the applicants have indicated that they will meet this requirement at the time of building permit. And that requirement is that the building must be solar ready. So it won't actually have solar infrastructure, or it will have solar infrastructure, but it won't actually have solar panels or any of that at this time. The applicants have provided connections to existing trails and pedestrian network through Garden of the Gods Park. They are planting 20% additional trees, which earns them an additional 2 points on the sustainable site improvement standards. The site also complies with the bicycle parking requirements, parking area design standards, development in the flood hazard area. As Erin stated in her presentation, the El Paso County Floodplain Administrator will review the plans for flood hazard standards compliance, and that happens during the building permit review phase. The plan set will also be reviewed by the Manitou Springs Fire Department for compliance with the wildfire mitigation standards. Drainage plans were reviewed by the engineering team and no issues were found. And this use is identified as a permitted use in the commercial zone district. The final approval criteria for minor development plans is number 1, general conformance with the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan and other plans and policies adopted by City Council. And number 2, the details of the use, site plan, building location, orientation, and exterior building materials excuse me, I did forget to mention that the building will be stuccoed similarly to the rest of the building. Those materials are compatible and harmonious with the surrounding neighborhood. Number 3, the project meets dimensional standards applicable to the zone district. The project grading, drainage, flood protection, stormwater quality, and stormwater mitigation complies with all applicable sections of the LUDC. The project complies with all development standards, and the project preserves, protects, integrates, or mitigates impacts to any identified sensitive or hazardous natural features associated with the site. Staff finds that this application complies with the development standards in the LUDC and recommends approval of this application as presented. And here we have our motion language, and this concludes my presentation.
Any questions for staff? Stephen?
Did you say that this was primarily to be used for storage?
Yes.
As I remember, a few years back, the Trading Post proposed to build a warehouse.
Stop. Any other previous application is irrelevant. We have to look at this at face value. We're not bound by precedences, meaning we're not a court. So what we did last week does not affect us next week, but we have to look at this application as it is presented today.
I understand.
David? Good.
In regard to that, you made a comment about congestion and traffic analysis, that was going to come later in the process. I didn't understand.
Sorry, me.
I apologize for the confusion. So that traffic congestion comment was presented as a public comment that staff received, and that was included in the package. A traffic impact study was not required as part of this application. A traffic impact letter was, which is a lighter assessment, and it is my understanding that there's been significant talk about the realignment of Becker's Lane before, and I understand and agree that previous applications hold no bearing. However, it was discussed with the City of Colorado Springs Planning Department and their traffic engineering department that a roadway alignment would not be supported as part of this application and would not be required as part of this application.
Thank you, Chelsea. On page 3, under the drainage report, it talks about the city engineer had concerns that over 2 acres of the site are covered with parking lots or buildings. And if in the future there was a decision to pave the west parking lot, isn't that already paved, the west parking lot?
My understanding is that let me go back to this map. So there is a parking lot on the western portion of the eastern lot, I believe. This portion I don't believe is paved. However, that may be more accurately,
Okay.
and I do apologize if
Okay.
I am not.
And then in the same regard, it does seem to me like Planning Commissioner Armstrong said, a traffic study would be needed for this before approval. Just my personal, particularly since there are going to be trucks of 22 feet in length coming in and out, and some storage and then additional retail space. I also wonder about just the notion of adding additional space for retail and storage in addition to what's already there. And I understand that the city of Colorado Springs has already done the swap. So that's a concern for me because it does abut the city park. So was there any consideration in the so-called realignment of Becker's Lane? Can you say something about that? Because that seems to be the entrance place for many of the trucks who are supplying product there, and also tourist trucks, buses. So I'm wondering if you could tell us more about the realignment ideas.
So I sat in on about one meeting with the traffic engineer for the city of Colorado Springs. That intersection is within the city of Colorado Springs jurisdiction, and they would be the driving force behind that roadway realignment due to safety issues. There is a note on this development plan stating that a roadway realignment would be required with any future development plan application.
So the realignment would be where Becker's Lane goes into Garden Drive?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And then I would just note for the future, I walk near that, the trading post almost every day. The posting was put on the back side of a signage, which is about this historic trading post. So no one would have seen that. I did call Ethan, and the posting was moved to the front fencing, but just so that we can be more careful about being able to notify the neighborhood about it.
Understood. Thank you for that feedback.
Any other questions for staff? I just have one, and according to the code, whenever there's a neighborhood meeting, there should be a written summary provided. Was that, I didn't see that. Was that provided to you?
You'll have to forgive me. This application was submitted while I was on maternity leave, and Ethan Schaefer was handling it. I do not know the answer, but let me find out. Could I get back to you while
Sure. I mean,
we talk to
the three letters were provided, but they're required to put in writing a summary of the actual meeting.
let me just pull that up. Hold on just a moment.
In the meantime, we can move on, right? Okay. Would the applicant like to come to the podium and share your thoughts? Can you say your name and address, please, for the record?
Tim Haas, 3905 Greenside Point, Colorado Springs, 80904.
Tim is the owner. My name is Zach Taylor. I'm with Taylor Architecture and Design. My office address is 620 South Cascade in Colorado Springs, and my home address is 1528 North Nevada Avenue in Colorado Springs.
Thank you.
Chelsea, can you pull up our development plan drawings? I might start with a overview of the project. It might clear up some of the questions that were occurring earlier. As Chelsea noticed, this has been an interesting process and project because it does straddle two jurisdictions. And so we have elements that are in Colorado Springs, elements that are in Manitou Springs, elements that included a land swap deal with Colorado Springs, and questions about that aren't quite applicable to what we're here for today because that's occurred and done and finalized. But I can speak to that process and talk about our proposed uses, the Becker's realignment discussion, traffic congestion, the west parking, I can clear that up. And then I can also go into our kind of presentation as well. Perfect. So on the screen there is our overall site plan. So you can see there's quite a few properties. All the properties that are listed are either owned by Haas Partners or by the city of Colorado Springs. So to back up in time, over a year ago, the land swap was for the kind of northeastern parcel that's kind of key shaped there on the left-hand side of the screen. That portion was given from the Haas Partnership to the city of Colorado Springs. That was about 2.6 acres. In exchange, the Haas Partnership received two parcels, which are there on the north side of the sheet. What we're calling a west portion that's somewhat square, and then east parcel. East parcel is what we're proposing development currently.
Chelsea, can you zoom in a little bit for us?
So she gets that up. Part of the reason two parcels were given from the city of Colorado Springs is the kind of curved area in between is a dedicated right of way for future Becker's Lane realignment. So right now Becker's Lane comes out of Manitou, obviously, and kind of curves right in front of the trading post and kind of ends into the parking lot before people make their way to Garden Lane. So the future realignment, again, not necessarily talking about that today, but the future realignment would go through the existing parking there to the west of the building, continue straight north, and then curve to meet Garden Lane at a 90-degree angle and kind of clean up the transition from Becker's Lane to Garden Lane and keep it out of the parking lot. When we talk about the west parking lot, that would be the new west parcel. Currently, that is undeveloped land. There is future talks with the city of Colorado Springs and the Parks Department to someday in the future limit traffic through the park to shuttle traffic. And we don't know when that's going to happen, but we're kind of planning that when that occurs, we would utilize that west portion as a parking lot, and the west side of the east parcel could become like a shuttle drop off and stop along the Garden Lane drive. So that covers kind of Becker's realignment, the west parking. The building addition that we're proposing, Chelsea, if you can go to the second sheet, it kind of blows up on the building a little bit. Perfect. The building addition is the darker shaded there on the eastern side of the existing building. The shade to the north is in Colorado Springs. So that's kind of our dividing line. The addition is about 5,000 square feet. Roughly 1,500 of that will be stock area or storage for the trading post, with 3,500 square feet of that being additional retail space. The additional stock area and the new drive for a delivery truck helps us in a couple of ways. One, right now the main loading dock for the trading post is on the southwest corner of the building, and there's a small stock area there, and so they have daily or sometimes multiple per day deliveries, and they have to bring stock through the retail space to get to the other side of the store. So we're hoping to kind of spread that out. And by having increased stock area in the addition, that'll help actually reduce the number of trucks and deliveries per day because we'll have more on-site storage. And so a 22-foot box truck is what I would consider a medium-sized truck. So think like a UPS or a FedEx truck, as opposed to an 18-wheeler or anything large like that. We don't have capacity for that anyway. And so that's really the intent of the added storage component of the new building. So I think that kind of addresses some of the questions that came up. So just to kind of roll back into our presentation, I will say that, the start of the staff report said that the building was built before 1980, which it was. It was built in 1929 for the original. So it's been around for over 95 years now. They've been good stewards and neighbors of the park. The park's been a tourist attraction as long as it's been a park, and even before that. And so I think we're just continuing to capitalize on the growing tourism in our area, which will in turn, be increased tax revenue for the city of Manitou Springs, as the entire, building lies within Manitou Springs. We kind of gave Colorado Springs the shaft on that end. Within Manitou Springs, as Chelsea noted, we are reducing impervious or hardscape area from the existing parking lot was there with the addition, meaning we're increasing landscape area. It's not a big increase, but it is worth noting that, you know, we're trying to reduce our footprint a little bit. Again, on the Manitou side, we're obviously adding paving on the Colorado Springs side. Talking about. Also wanted to point out that with our submittal for the requirements for the sustainable site improvement standards and incentives, I think 5 points are required for that. We went above and beyond. With our proposed development, we're qualifying for 10 points. So we've doubled that standard. Again, trying to be good stewards and good neighbors to the area. And that basically we feel that we meet and exceed all the direct required standards as set forth in the planning code for Manitou Springs. You know, we're in a commercial zone, so we don't have any issues with our allowed use. The drainage plan that was provided didn't call out any issues. The geological hazard evaluation that was performed did not come up with any issues. Our landscape is the increased plantings that we're doing are going to help with runoff from the existing parking lot and the new proposed parking lot to help filter that water before it does get into that creek bed during storm conditions. And then just lost my train of thought.
I think you're doing great.
Drainage.
I have thought.
Drainage, right? There was one other thing I was going to mention. Do you have anything you want to add, Tim?
Well, I would love to, and if you think of it, then, so good evening, thank you. I didn't mean to chime in from the back. There has been some confusion over one of our previous submittals, and I want to make it as clear as I possibly can out of the gate that this is a totally separate issue. We have since moved the operation that I had hoped we would keep in Manitou to Colorado Springs. So the portion of this addition that is storage is truly a daily use sort of thing. It is not a warehouse. So they're truly two separate and distinct projects. So I'm happy to try to answer any questions on that if you have those. And then I guess the other comment I wanted to make before I dove into my notes here was I want to apologize if there was confusion on the posting. I put that up personally and I placed it where Colorado Springs told me to place theirs. So my assumption was if I place it in the same place, that probably is a reasonable thing. If it was not reasonable for the city of Manitou Springs, I apologize. That was me. I moved it as soon as the folks from planning reached out to us. So I apologize if there was any confusion there. I was truly thinking I was following the rules. So Zach did a great job. Just a couple quick comments I would like to make. As we have always provided our parking, it's shared use, meaning anybody that is visiting the Garden of the Gods Park can park there. We're not exclusive to folks that happen to be our guests. So we believe some of the improvements that we're making will benefit the park and its visitors. I will tell you that I know people get nervous with parking. Zach did a really nice job of designing this so that we were able to save as many mature trees as possible. So we might have been able to squeeze a few more parking places in there. For what it's worth, I want you to know we made the decision that it was worth it to try to save as many trees as we possibly could. I also think it's worth mentioning the proposed delivery on that east side of the building. That would be for only our truck. It would not be for any other commercial truck that would be coming in. And it would primarily be for clothing that would be kind of serviced on that side. as Zach mentioned. So we're not proposing or asking that a FedEx truck or UPS is going to navigate through there and go to that side. Those deliveries would remain the same for what it's worth. So that would be utilized once a day or once every day, every other day, something like that. So I think that's worth mentioning. Zach touched on these. To me, I think the big concerns are drainage, understandably. And we have attempted to be good neighbors during our ownership of this business for nearly 50 years. Going back 85 years, the trading post has been there or more. I guess it's almost 100 now. We have had a study done that shows that there is really going to be very little or no impact there. From a traffic standpoint, although it wasn't required at this point, as I understand it, we did pay for and get a letter showing that truly what we are trying to do is by no means generate additional traffic coming up Becker's Lane. We are trying to create additional parking that's visible, that those that are already in the Garden of the Gods may stop and see us. So from the letter that I think you all should have, or Zach has a copy of, there's no impact to Becker's Lane. I think I already touched on the old warehouse. I guess,
Tim, excuse me, are you
Yeah.
are you referring to the letter from the city of Colorado Springs?
no, we had a separate.
So that was the last thing I was going to mention when my brain floated away tonight. So part of our pre-application meeting with the city of Manitou, they did request a traffic impact study or letter to be provided. Because the discussion with Becker's Lane moved that to a future application, it kind of became a little moot, but we did have the study done already anyway. And so the addition to the trading post with the 5,000 square feet, the traffic report noted that it would increase Becker's traffic by 26 trips per day, which is a less than 2% increase from the 2023 annual average daily traffic volume that was counted. And it was the traffic engineer's professional opinion that the expansion of the trading posts would not result in a perceptible change in the traffic volume on Becker's Lane. So I do have that the staff does have as in their file. Thank you.
I guess the final thing I would say is, again, we have attempted for many, many years to be a helpful member of the community. We've tried to be good neighbors over the years. And I think this will only further that cause for us, and it won't impact the residents of Manitou Springs other than the extent that hopefully we would have some increased sales tax revenues, property tax revenues, et cetera, for the city of Manitou. And, with that, I know there's some confusion on the Becker's Lane realignment. I'm happy to answer any questions along with Zach on those things, but they're not part of this, I don't think, at this point. But I'm happy to try to expand our thoughts on it if you'd like. Thank you.
Well, you're right. It's not part of this, and it's an awkward design to begin with. So good for you for working on that. But are there any questions for the applicant relative to this?
I have one, and I think it's relative to this. The space that is on the south side of your existing building, it's zone general residency. It's now being used. It's where the two cars are and employee parking and so forth. Will there be an impact to that? And does that need a rezoning? And that is probably more a question for staff.
So with our current proposal, we're not proposing any changes to the south side of the building. A portion of that lot that you're referring to is zone commercial. And it does bleed into the other lots that are owned by a Haas partnership, but we are not proposing any changes to that portion of the site at this time.
Staff does not require any rezoning with this application.
Yep.
what I might mention though is I am actively, and actually had a conversation today, interested in trying to remove those trains from that area, because during the COG renovations, it seemed like something that might be a great addition to our business. But at 22,000 and 38,000 pounds, they're not easily moved nor improved. But I'm actively intending to get them out of that area.
I appreciate your patience. So if I understand this correctly, you're not increasing parking as part of this proposal. You're simply relocating and re-landscaping it. And then there is future parking that you outlined, but that's not part of this proposal.
That's correct. We're actually, from a net perspective, we're decreasing parking by like 3 spaces. But we are over parked for what's required. And we are increasing some striping to add some additional accessible parking stalls per the current requirements. But correct, we are not adding parking at this time.
And so am I correct in thinking that there's no capacity changes except a major increase in storage capacity?
Well, so the building addition is 5,000 square feet, roughly 5,016. So again, 3,500 of that will be additional retail sales area.
Oh, okay.
And then 1,500 of that will be storage. So it's kind of a 1/3, 2/3 split.
Okay, I think I get the picture better. And then there is no appreciable increase in traffic to the trading post. There is a 26 car increase or trip increase according to the city of Colorado Springs traffic engineer, but it's not significant.
Actually, this was per private traffic engineer.
Oh, okay.
For the study that was requested. But that is correct. What we're hoping to do with the improvements, as Tim said, is capture more of the already additional traffic that comes along Garden Lane through the park.
Thank you.
And if I might just add, for what it's worth, we do spend considerable dollars promoting the Garden of the Gods trading post. We spend $0 promoting access up Becker's Lane. All of it is to enter through the Garden of the Gods by balanced rock. So again, with what Zach said, it's only an attempt to capture a slightly additional amount already coming on Garden Lane. No increase on our part up Becker's Lane.
Mr. Haas, is it possible for the delivery trucks, the 22-foot trucks, can they get through Balanced Rock and go in Garden Lane? Thank you.
Now, and for what it's worth, the city of Colorado Springs prohibits those type of trucks through the garden.
I thought it was interesting, the comment about no exterior additional lights. That's, is there a way to?
Yeah, so
Put that in
I
writing?
think we may have overstated a little bit, but we will probably have a code required egress lights at the exit doors that are required by the building code. We'll probably have a, full cutoff downward facing light at the loading dock for security purposes, but we are not intending to add lights to the parking lot. As Chelsea said, it's correct that the trading post hours of operations pretty much follow park hours and daylight hours. So with the exception of, a couple of weeks in the winter, when it gets dark at 4:30 and they're open till 5, most of the time they're shut down at night, and the park actually closes their gates and prohibits access. And it includes your property, where those gates are.
Voluntarily, yes.
Yes.
Well, that's good news. And I know that was a neighborhood concern. I don't doubt that the summary was provided for the public neighborhood meeting, but we don't have it. So in lieu of the required written report, can you summarize how that meeting went down?
It It was in February, so let me jog my memory. There were a lot of comments and discussion. Again, there was some conflagration with the previous application for a warehouse that maybe we're trying to do that now. We're not trying to do that now. This is a total separate, we're trying to get basically more retail space with some storage to help reduce, truck traffic. There was questions about the land swap. And so we tried to clarify those. There was concerns over drainage and traffic that we've kind of already summarized and talked about.
I think you did a good job from February. I think drainage, traffic, those are really the primary things, at least in my memory, that were concerns, and I understand.
Sure.
I spend more of my life there than anywhere else, so I share those same concerns. And again, it's our intention to comply with all of the requirements for this development and to make sure that we continue to be good neighbors. I guess I would just again add, we are zoned commercial. We are asking for no variances. We're well below the developable amount of land. So I think we've met all those requirements and at least did our best to attempt or address any concerns there might have been at that public meeting.
Can you ballpark how many people were there and how long it lasted?
I want to say there was some staff representatives from both Manitou and Colorado Springs. I had my design team there, which included my civil engineer, my landscape engineer, neighborhood participants, I would say between 12 and 15. So total crowd of 20 to 25 people. It was actually a pretty good turnout, I thought. Good.
And I believe it was approximately an hour. It was not an extensive meeting.
Yeah, the presentation was about 20, 30 minutes, and then we answered questions as long as people had questions. We had scheduled it for a full 2 hours, and I think everybody was completely out of there within an hour and a half.
Okay. Is there anything else you guys would like to add? Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you for your consideration.
Would you like to stay here or go? Yeah, all right.
Is there anybody in the audience that would like to say a few words?
My name's Polly Fiedler. I live at 103 Beckers. I was at that public meeting. One of the things that did not happen, it was open for questions, but it didn't get open for comment. So maybe that's also part of why it wasn't. And I talked to Chelsea, or I communicated with Chelsea about that. Pardon me?
It's hard to hear you. Just like.
Oh, I don't know where. Can you hear me better now?
Pull it towards you. Here you go.
Pardon me?
There you go.
Okay, can you
Let it
hear
rip.
now?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. All right. So there wasn't an invitation for comment, and that was a mistake. So that may be part of why it was short. There were questions asked, and so you could you could imply from the questions asked the concerns. But so that's why I wrote comments to the Planning Commission, because there wasn't an invitation for that at that meeting. My concerns are in two areas. One is that hasn't been spoken to, because by the letter of the law, it's deemed, it's commercial. So, and by the letter of the law, Mr. Haas is meeting those conditions. But the the Perkins family that donated the land, I'm going to read, it's just a very short summary of what their intent was. And that was, they gave it to Colorado Springs on the condition that it shall remain free to the public, where no intoxicating liquor shall be manufactured, sold, or dispensed, where no building or structure shall be erected except those necessary to properly care for, protect, and maintain the area as a public park. So there have been land swaps, but these are contrived. This is the Garden of the Gods. So although by the letter of the law, Mr. Haas is complete, I think he's complying exactly what's being asked, and he does have consideration for the neighborhood and doing it well. However, I don't think it fits with the intent at all of what the Garden of the Gods and the people who donated this land meant. I actually didn't put it together that the addition is 3,500 retail space and 1,500 storage. And I didn't know that fact that they told tonight that they have to deliver and then carry through the store. Now, I get that that is a big disadvantage. So I'm actually in favor of the storage part. I don't think that is a hindrance, but I think 3,500 more square feet of retail space is not necessary and does not meet the intent. Mr. Haas is a really good businessman and he has been good to the community, but I think he's been very successful and I don't think it needs to be 3,500 more square feet of retail space in our Garden of the Gods. The other point is that, and maybe it doesn't seem like a big thing environmentally, but so I think his name is Zach, did I get that right? Said that within Manitou's area, they are not increasing any more impervious space, but that's again contrived between the three areas of the rooftop and then it having to build out more paved area for parking. It does increase the impervious space for that area. And they're putting in good plantings. I was at that meeting. I thought the description of the plantings that they went into much more detail at that meeting of the plantings. I think they were very well thought out for absorbing moisture, but it still is a lot more pavement. So those are my main concerns that I liked the Planning Commission to take into consideration. If you can, I don't know if you can take into consideration the intent, but to me, that's the most important. And I hope we can consider that. Thank you.
Thank you for coming out tonight.
Jan Johnson from 113 Beckers. And I guess, continuing with the litany of focusing on the intent for the parkland, according to the Perkins. And Mr. Haas and his community of people that work for him are lovely. They add to the nature of the whole area. I have nothing against that. Matter of fact, they're a terrific asset. But adding more square footage for retail, and I think even for storage, although I'll understand that extension. But for retail, when the intent, as the Perkins say, to care for, protect, and maintain the area, that's the only way in which a structure should be added. That is totally against what the Perkins had said. And if we are trying to live to the ethical and moral compass of them, I think we fail by approving that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Holly Fiedler again. I just wanted to add one more thing that I actually would be open to just adding storage. So if they're adding 1,500 square feet for storage purposes for what they described as kind of an unwieldy situation, I'd be in favor of that. I am not in favor of the retail. I don't think it's necessary.
Anybody else? Okay, the public input is closed. You're at the table, and it'd be nice to hear from everyone. You want to start?
I'd be glad to glad to kick off the discussion. I agree with the comments of Polly Fiedler and Jan Johnson. I think the Garden of the Gods is a wonderful asset. I take my family and friends there.
Gloria, closer.
Louder.
Closer and louder. As I was saying, I agree with comments of Polly Fiedler and Jan Johnson. And I also think that the Garden of the Gods Trading Post is a wonderful asset to the community. I take my friends and family there. I particularly like the things in the back, Mr. Haas. The things I can't quite afford, but I like to look at those. I am really not in favor of the expansion, primarily because I just think it's, we've got a neighborhood and we've got a city park, and I just can't see the need for additional retail space and more pavement. So I'm inclined to vote against it.
Is there something, somehow you don't feel it meets the code? Is there some aspect of the code you don't feel it meets
If
that
I'm-
you would vote
I think
against
the
it for that
only
reason?
thing, Commissioner Storm, is, let's see, probably it's 18.06.4.12 minor development plans. It's the harmonious impact with the surrounding neighborhood. I don't believe it has a harmonious. I think it's an economic benefit to the community and probably to Mr. Haas. I think environmentally, it's a detriment.
Well,
Sorry.
Well, I know we worked long and hard on doing the revisions to the code, and updating things. And I appreciate the aspects of, how the land was granted in Garden of the Gods. And, I love Garden of the Gods. I ride my bike every day. But I do see the thought that went into making this proposal meet every aspect of our code, from the dark sky to the setbacks. I mean, there's no aspect of this that doesn't meet our current code. And for that reason, I mean, even how the new addition is set back away from the community and the housing, and and for that reason, I really can't see a reason not to support it.
Anybody else?
I guess I'd say that I live near the trading post. And I don't think that piece of property that they're going to develop is going to be particularly obtrusive. What we didn't hear from the owner is what they're going to do with the retail space and why the need for that. We heard more about the storage space. So I have mixed feelings, but I'm leaning towards approving.
I'm concerned that there's a community meeting and we don't have that information. Mike, you made some valued attempts to get some sense of that for us to make a decision. Gloria, I'm with you emotionally. I think Mr. Haas is a phenomenal businessman. The Trading Post is an asset, and I note that the neighbors acknowledged the positive relationships and the positive impacts of the Trading Post and its staff. And I don't think my fellow commissioners can correct me if I'm wrong. There's this ongoing tension between business and residents in Manitou. And it only gets worse as the tourism grows. But I don't think that's relevant to our decision. It's not in the code. And so I will a tad reluctantly vote to approve. And I do want to note that your presentation was very convincing, well thought out, well intentioned. I respect what you had to say, and my emotional response is totally irrelevant. So there you are.
Stephen?
Could staff, I'm afraid my computer quit. Could staff tell me what we're voting on again exactly?
This is a minor development plan for a 5,016 square foot commercial expansion.
Where does it go from here?
This would be the final approval.
Okay.
So on decisions like this, we are the final deciding body, but anybody can appeal anything. If we approve an application, somebody could appeal our decision. If we deny it, it can be appealed as well. Anybody can appeal any decision we make. But this does not go to a higher authority. My thoughts, it's a tough one because, somebody said, why do they need more retail? Well, the answer is obvious. It's money. If this was in a location somewhere else, it would be kind of a no-brainer. That the pain we have is it's not anywhere. It's one of the most beautiful places in the area, if not the country. But then, and so we have that, meaning, and we could deny it based on code issues. But then on the other hand, it's a business, it's a private business, and they have right to do, there's nothing code wise that they're doing wrong. They're not asking for a variance. That was stated, and I think that's very, very important. So all that being said, I think I'm in favor of approval, but I hope that we all stick to our guns on how we feel when it comes to a vote. On that note, does anybody want to make a motion or have further discussion?
I'd just like to point out that we don't seem to be questioning improvements to residents in this area. I mean, as long as they're within the codes, they're fine to add to their property, to their house. So I'm not sure why it should be different for a business.
Well, that's why we exist as a planning commission. There are things that the planning department can administratively approve. Applicant comes in and they play by the rules, they get stamped, they move on, and we never see it. There are other very specific items that come in front of us, and we have the ability to look at things beyond, like as an example, like Gloria pointed out, the project meets, the details of the use, site design, building location, orientation, exterior building materials are compatible and harmonious with surrounding neighborhood. What does that mean? Right? That's where we come in. So our job is to make sure that there's another level of bureaucracy, I guess, somebody else to look at this to make sure that it's harmonious. And another opportunity to have public input, right? I agree with your comment. In no fault to the city, there's been some changes, et cetera, and it's not a showstopper by any means, but we should have had more input on the public meeting. It's important, But I think if the public in that neighborhood, if they were extremely interested in this project, they'd be here. Or they'd be online, or they'd write more letters. So that tells me that the neighborhood is condoning this. So, there you go. I'll get off my soapbox.
I would just like to say, in terms of the 300 feet, that for notification, most of the homes in that neighborhood are further away than the 300 feet. So they were not notified. So if they weren't walking by and saw the signage or happened to see it in the bulletin, they would not have known. Just FYI.
Yeah.
And for future, better coverage on information for the
Yes.
neighborhood.
Right, I agree. And, as a team, maybe we can, our job is also to go to these places. We have to do that that's our job. So, let's keep an eye out for that kind of stuff. It's a very good catch. Anybody more thoughts? Make a motion? Approve, deny, delay? Modify?
Motion to approve MNR 2401, minor development plan for Garden of the Gods Trading Post. Based on the findings that the request meets the review criteria for granting a minor development plan as set forth in City Code Section 18.06.4.12.
Second.
I'll second.
Final time for discussion. All in favor of approval, raise your hand. That's 5 and 1 opposed. And you're welcome to discuss your opposition. I think you already have, but you can rephrase it if you like.
I'm good.
Okay. Motion's approved. Thank you, guys.
I would like to note that Manitou has much higher standards than Colorado Springs in terms of posting planning commission signage, so.
Didn't we used to do 500 feet? Why? And it's now 300 feet? Because I noticed on other things I thought it used to be 500 feet, but now I notice that they're noticing 300 feet. Does anybody know?
That was part of the code update.
And
What was it?
it's also at the discretion of the director to enlarge that if he likes. Is there any other business you'd like to talk about?
Well, let me ask the director, is there any downside to making it 500 feet?
Just for the record, Fred Rolandhagen, Planning Director, from my past experience, it's always good to be consistent with your public notification requirements, because if you're not consistent, if you choose to go 300 feet for one development and 500 feet for another development, you could be questioned or you could be challenged for being inconsistent. And I've been told, treat them all good, treat them all bad. It doesn't matter. Just treat them all the same.
I guess my point was, I don't remember making the decision to reduce this footprint.
In the new code.
I would like to just reiterate that the folks who attended the neighborhood meeting were asked to all put their email address down so that we could take attendance. And I did email those folks directly when the packet was published. So we did also take that step.
Anybody else? Can I just ask a generic question in the interest of education? Nothing specific, but let's just say that I have a commercial property in downtown Manitou, and I level my retail business and I build I don't know, let's just say a condo, for example, why is the condo uh, under the retail, under the residential requirements when it's when my X property is in a commercial zone?
Why is it not being rezoned?
Why is because of the condo that I want to build on commercial land, why is that condo considered residential when it's on commercial property?
Why do we have to rezone?
Well, I'm just generically, just chit chatting, I'm just curious how.
Do you mind if I take this one? Or take a stab at it at least. So multifamily residential is a gray area between commercial use and residential use. So what we have here is that the zone district is kind of like one layer, and it permits all these different types of uses. And we find that it's more effective to regulate the built environment based on the use when we have this sort of Euclidean zoning as opposed to a form-based zoning. And so what that results in is residential buildings like duplexes that feel residential and produce a residential environment rather than, you know, a building like the Holiday Inn or any of the other motels that feel commercial. And so it's really the use that dictates the standards.
Okay, so, but back in my example, I would prefer being held under the commercial regulations, I guess, because it's the most, it's liberal, and residential is tighter. So, I mean, I hear what you're saying loud and clear, and it makes sense, but I guess how would I decide as a home, as a property owner, how would I decide which set of rules the city gets to play by?
So they didn't decide, staff decided.
Okay.
And that's based on the analysis and the proposed use. So they propose the use and we tell them which set of rules they need to apply.
I see.
So really, the most effective way that we go about this is through our pre-application meetings and through continuous iterations. So when you get the application package, it has been refined to comply with the codes that way back when
Sure.
we evaluated and applied the correct set
So
of
the
standards.
zoning wouldn't change. You would just let people know which, whether it's commercial or residential requirements that apply. So it would still be, the zoning never changed.
The zoning could change, however, it didn't need to in this instance, and so requiring it when it doesn't need to could be deemed a burden.
Okay. And just since we're doing point of clarification, the south parking lot in Garden of the Gods is zone general residency. It's never been used for that. I don't doubt they have any intention of ever using it that way. So should Mr. Haas be, I mean, is there any reason he should be trying to change the zoning, or would that be city option, or do we leave it alone? Does it matter?
So typically, something like that would have to be triggered by an application on that parcel. This application was not on that parcel.
Right. So if he wants to, in the future, do something else commercial in that area, then it would fall under commercial requirements?
So then it would have
Even
to
though
be
it's general,
rezoned.
then it would have to be rezoned. Okay.
Right, because the intensity of use has to be equal to or less than that which is allowed by the zone district. So in the case of the Green Willow, the residential use is seen as less intensive than the commercial use. So therefore that residential use is allowed within that zone district, whereas a commercial use in a residential zone district is more intensive use.
Okay.
I
I actually was kind of disappointed he's going to move the cog rails. I would love to see those train cars as a part of his complex.
In summary, I think in the big picture, what's being said is in a commercial zone, you can build residential, but you can't build commercial in a residential.
Within reason. So we can't do single family residential within commercial, unless it complies with the standards.
Okay.
So there are certain stipulations, and again, just to reiterate, it's a gray area.
Yeah.
Multifamily housing is always a gray area.
Sure.
Fred, did you have anything to add that maybe
Not too much, except that usually if you want to know what's allowed in any zone district, you look at the zoning, and there's a list of permitted uses, right? And I'm presuming that we have that in our zone districts.
Yeah.
And there are some commercial zone districts that allow for residential uses. There are some, or vice versa. I've seen some industrial zone districts that allow for residential uses and so on and so forth. And that is up to each individual community to decide what uses they want in each zoning district. And I don't know I'm not familiar with the history of the evolution of Manitou Springs zoning, but at some point in the past, it was, I guess, accepted that certain residential uses should be allowed in this commercial zoning district.
we do have, just as another fun fact, I guess, as fun as planning facts can be, in the downtown zone district, residential is only allowed if it's set back or if it's above the main commercial facade. So, so the downtown zone district is treated differently from commercial, is treated differently from all of the others. And then we do have a mixed use zone district now, though, since the zoning code has been in effect, we haven't had any properties request to rezone to that. So there's a chance in the future that it will fit more cleanly. It just doesn't right now.
Good. Thank you. Any other business? Notice of council action and updates. Any scoop?
No, I don't have any updates on council action, but just a reminder, with Plan Manitou, we're continuing our public engagement process. We had a pop-up booth at the Ice Cream Social last Monday, and we are going to have another pop-up booth at the Day of Friendship coming up on Saturday, July 27th. And so if you happen to be there, stop on by and see what we have at the pop-up booth. Also, after that, just keep in mind that we're going to have a working session, Planning Commission and a joint Planning Commission City Council working session on Plan Manitou on, when is that? On Tuesday, August 13th in the evening at 6 o'clock in the evening. So we'll send out notification for that. But that'll be just a working session to discuss Plan Manitou, the current status of Plan Manitou, what we've gotten for public comment, public participation, and discuss where we are and the direction of the update.
And you said the meeting was with the Planning Commission.
And City Council.
Planning Commission, it's a joint working session with Planning Commission and City Council.
Okay. And it's Tuesday, what, August?
August 13th.
Guys got that? We're invited. Okay. Everyone happy?
Yes.
Adjourned.